Domestically, we inhabit a climate of surveillance and machine sensing, a plethora of devices and drone-like architectures, being in our midst, if not on our person, all of which could be said possess the latent cooperative potential befitting autonomous agency within a networked environment. This latent potential preempts then the apex of the evolutionary ambition of the military drone as a fully autonomous convergent device. As the purveyors of remote warfare seek end-to-end automation, the drone operator, like the YouTube moderator, like the machine learning data trainer, is but a temporary interocular, a facilitation role that is designed to enable a much grander project, hidden human labour infrastructures in the service of the machine. If the next desired evolutionary step is full autonomy, then final evolutionary leap in that process is a distributed hive with the intent to swarm. Allen and Hussein describe in their essay on hyperwar a convergence of physical and virtual technologies at speed. Quote, AI-enabled techniques such as autonomous swarming and cognitive analysis of sensor data will make the decision-making process so tight that it becomes almost impossible to keep humans in the loop in most places. Commanders can continue to supply intent, but the prosecution of much of war can conceivably shift to machines. In essence, the battle space has rapidly become the information space. While cyber war seems like a quaint expression, it supports the pseudoscience narrative of technological suprematism while still remaining obscure and opaque. The US Air Force Research Laboratory envisions swarms of military drones that are, quote, guided by autonomous programming that allow them to change their objective mid-mission, like a flock of birds suddenly changing direction. This goes beyond a mere reshaping of the systems of control. This is not a singular act of data transmission or analysis by a network system. This is the system literally assuming control of and responding to sensor data. To preempt this acceleration, DARPA is seeking to embed and virtualize human agency through neural augmentation. Brain-computer interfacing, once the preserve of mobility support and war veteran recovery, is now being put to use for far more insidious ends. As Al Emondi, a director of DARPA's Next Generation Non-Surgical Neurotechnology Program, N3, observes, working with drones and swarms of drones operating at the speed of thought rather than through mechanical devices, those types of things are what these devices are really for. The foundations of these vectors across technology, discourse, and myth-making is derived from a very Gothic high-tech genealogy. This is also evocative of tendencies within cultural production if we consider for a moment the intersection of machine autonomy and virtual reality as complementary mediated constructions. While we might typically describe virtual reality as things, agents, and events that exist in cyberspace, we might consider a drone to in fact be operating via machine perception in a virtually constructed representation of its own reality, a virtual sandbox to be manipulated, or let's say administrated, within an interface of digital components connected to an even larger network of physical and virtual fabrications, a seductive mix of aesthetics and remote controlled power. The scenario was no doubt on mind of Bruce Sterling, sci-fi author and speculative futurist, while on assignment for Wired magazine back in 1993, as he was sniffing about inside DARPA's nascent VR tech. Quote, now imagine two armies, two strategically assisted cyberspace trained post-industrial panoptic ninja armies going head to head. What on earth would that look like? A conventional war, a nuclear war, but a true war in the age of intelligent machines, analysed by nanoseconds to the last square micron. Who would survive? And what would be left of them in the end? The functional ecology of the drone depends on perception in virtual realms. As Paul Virilio noted, of advances in telescopy, we no longer can go there to see. Instead, one reality is transmitted from its virtual other. Drones, and by the virtue, autonomous robotic systems, therefore exist in virtual representations of a reality they themselves participate in the authoring of. As early as 1980, Marvin Minsky, writing in Omni magazine, laid out a theory that the evolution of the socio-technical image occurs within the narrative of automation. Quote, in the long term, any step towards telepresence is a step towards robots. The evolution in robotics, animation, and cognition, an expression of their liveness, in which they would appear to discreetly collaborate with other systems, networks, devices, data, images, but also with one another. Is that not the premise of elaborate fiction such as Ex Machina, Humans, Westworld, Blade Runner, and more recently, the AI scare porn of Next? These Hollywood creations not only play to our fears and anxieties, but also articulate the engineer's quest for perfection. Domesticated AI assistants, deluxe bots, and humanoid avatars are highly stylized, technically iterated singular events, inventions with bespoke purposes and distinct identities. The Sophias, the Ericas, the Nadines, and the Hiroshis of this world. However, capitalist cultural logic tells us that that right bot with the right skin job, with the perfect demeanor, and the functional yet compliant autonomy will eventually be serialized, barcoded, and mass-produced. It's in a military context. Are not the ambitions for machine autonomy and swarm-like cooperation similarly a desire for the auto-sublime? An elite battle division of perfectly realized war machines in which targeted kill shots are carefully choreographed maneuvers. The kill itself, high-resolution portraiture, its efficient lines of code, symbolic of its ability to cycle through the observe, orient, decide, and act loop faster than the next lethal weapon on the block. So then, isn't Dolores of Sweetwater and her clone army the perfect robot kill unit? After generations of her and her kind being killed in the service of the human elite, does she not realise that Westworld was in fact a war game? You bet she does. She busts out of Dodge City and creates her own clone stack to wreak havoc in the real world, to destroy the human mainframe, so to speak. Dolores and her kind have enormous swarm potential. On a humanist level, the fear of the swarm is instinctive, it's primal, it's relatable, it springs from a deep historical resonance, the locust, the pandemic, the marauding horde, the stampede, the military parade, the bomber squadron. Swarms congregate, they colonize, characterized as they are by their machinic yet zoomorphic dexterity, they murmurate and pivot, and while their multitudes might subvert the drone's singular stealthy advantage, they conserve their anonymity in their numbers, even in their proximity. Meanwhile, back at the cinema, anxiety of vengeful, recalcitrant swarms of autonomous AI is writ large in the post-9/11 CGI canvases of The Matrix, of the Star Wars, of the Lord of the Rings, horizon-blotting expressions of digital multitudes. As Kristen Wissel observes, these swarm films preempt an apocalyptic demise. More often than not, she says, the multitude's appearance heralds the end of freedom, the end of civilization, the end of an era, or even the end of human time altogether. Gregoire Chamoun, discussing Adorno's reading of the German V1 bombing raids in World War II, linked the sightless rockets to fascism itself, observing that the nightmare that takes shape on the horizon is one in which weapons themselves become the only detectable agents for the violence which they are the means. The ambition of technological power, he notes, and we should read this in the context of state-sanctioned remote warfare, is to be mechanical, to be distant, to be subjectless. Power, he writes, exists wherever it is working actively in order to make itself forgotten. It is working, however, here on two fronts. When it comes to the drone strike and the forecasting of the swarm, it's not only obscure and efface its authorship, but also to consolidate socio-technical structures of fear. If we return to the drone singular then, in Pakistan, children are afraid of the sky. As a 13-year-old boy from North Waziristan told US Congress in 2013, I no longer love blue skies. I now prefer grey skies. The drones do not fly when the skies are grey. When sky brightens, the drones return and we live in fear.